Lovers of lore, thank you for joining me for the first installment of the Lost Caverns of Ixalan story. This part of the story starts out focusing on Quintorius, and you may recall in recent stories, Quintorius went from being a Strixhaven student into a full-on planeswalker. So, in the time that he's been gone and we haven't seen him, he's actually been wandering around to a number of different planes. He has powers that let him talk with ancient spirits, and so he is focused on an ancient civilization that he doesn't know the actual name for, so he is calling them the Coin Empire. And that is what has led him to Ixalan. So at the beginning of the story, he has just arrived on Ixalan, and he's confronted by a dinosaur with bright orange feathers. Now, this dinosaur wastes no time and promptly leaps to attack Quintorius. Now, Quintorius manages to dodge it, but it puts him squarely in the path of another dinosaur. Apparently, they're hunting in pairs. But it gets even worse as a much bigger dinosaur also appears. So now Quintorius is looking at a 3-on-1 situation, and his mind started to race. What sort of magic does he want to use? Does he want to try and topple trees down on these dinosaurs? He ultimately decides to cast a spell. He starts to cast it, and the idea is it would compel the dinosaurs to leave, but his spell was interrupted by the appearance of a young warrior. She actually called to the largest dinosaur, and it ran over to her obediently. And then with a gesture, she waved away the smaller 2 dinosaurs. She then introduced herself as Weta. She had been told by Huatli to expect Quintorius's arrival, and so she escorted him, and as she did so, he marveled at the beauty of Arazka, the Golden City. It was a sight to behold, but its beauty had been marred by the Phyrexian invasion, leaving acid-pocked doors and gouged up roads, along with other signs of what had happened. Quint was taken to the temple where Saheeli and Huatli waited for him. He came to Ixalan because he was sent a message by Saheeli. They had information that might be connected to the Coin Empire. When Quintorius arrived where they were, he saw there was a massive stone door with all of these little slots around it, and Huatli and Saheeli had a number of tablets laid out in front of them. And these tablets depicted the same coins that Quintorius was familiar with. This was a direct sign of the Coin Empire. Up until this point, Huatli had been translating the tablets, but she had only been partially successful. They had some cryptic information that said something along the lines of it would lead to the birthplace of humanity and the home of the gods, and that these tablets would open the massive stone door that led to this promised land. But the emperor was getting impatient. He didn't want to wait any longer. He wanted to smash his way through the door. Now, Quintorius, as a lover of all things old, was aghast at the idea of the ancient door being damaged. So he quickly set to the task of helping to translate the tablets. The story then shifts over to Malcolm, who is a siren pirate of Ixalan. He was investigating a mysterious death. A miner named Lank, who was very much alive a few hours ago, was not alive anymore. Now his veins were blackened, and fungus erupted from his face and all over his body. Malcolm had been sent to investigate this by Captain Vance, but he also had a personal interest in the matter because he actually owned shares in the mine as well. So he wanted to know very much who was behind this. Was it the Sun Empire? Was it the River Heralds? The vampires? Malcolm resolved to look deeper. The story then moves over to Amalia. She is a vampire cartographer who is in the process of mapping out Ixalan, but she's unique in that she's plagued by visions of a golden door and waterfalls of scorching fire. She doesn't know what it means, but she's a part of an expedition, and this expedition is being led by Vito. He basically ignored her existence. He was focused on leading his troops and he had a journal he kept referring to that he would never let anybody else look at. Amalia knew they were hunting for a temple that had the answers that the vampires needed, but she wondered if she would find the golden door from her visions there. She pulled out her map and used blood magic. A combination of ash and her own lifeblood flowed into the map, marking out every single detail of all the lands that she had traveled. And once again, she felt the pull of the door calling out to her. The story then returns to Quintorius, and now he has successfully helped Huatli and Saheeli complete the translation. It spoke of 320 years of darkness, an imprisoned god named Chimmel. They learned of the Coman, the fifth people who were exiled to the surface of Ixalan. They discovered there was another door that would lead to the inner heart of Ixalan. Using the fully translated text, they were able to place the tablets into slots all around the door, and the door glowed and cracked open. Inside, they found a giant, horrendous body. It was a horned humanoid, the horn so big they reached all the way to the ceiling, and there were many spears jutting from its body, but due to its size, they looked smaller, like it had had a number of arrows fired into it. And nearby, there were a number of dead warriors with their weaponry laid beside them. The most curious thing about them was that their bones glowed purple and pink. The story then returns to Malcolm. He's investigating the miners' camp now. It's a place called Downtown. It looked completely abandoned. Everything had been left mid-task and unfinished. Even meals were left uneaten. Now, of course, they had rotted by this point. After searching through the camp thoroughly, they discovered that one of the elevators had the word down scrawled in front of it with what was possibly blood. Malcolm dispatched one of his men back to Captain Vance to report the situation, and the goblin pirate Breeches stepped up beside Malcolm. Down, he asked? Malcolm nodded. Back with Amalia, the vampire contingent has arrived at the Temple of Aclazotz. Amalia had continued to expand her map until Vito declared that they would reawaken the ancient vampire god Aclazotz. Vito brandished a magical lance and a journal. This is the Spear of Tarion, and this is his journal. It details his journeys with Saint Alenda. It holds secrets the church has kept from us. Amalia was wary. There was a big schism in the church right now, with some people believing the old ways were right, and some people going against that. And she could hear the rumblings of other uneasy vampires as Vito was speaking. But nonetheless, he led them into the temple, and in the deep depths of the temple, they found an obsidian altar in front of a golden door. Amalia was genuinely surprised to find that although it was a golden door, it wasn't actually the door from her vision. Some of the soldiers tried to force the door, but it wouldn't budge. Vito spoke. "Our God guides me." He had one of the human baggage handlers brought out and held down on the altar. A high-ranking vampire by the name of Bartolome objected. "You corrupt the sacred blood rites." Amalia was full of hope. Maybe Bartolome would have some sway here and stop Vito. But Vito just sneered. "These are the true rites of Alcazotz." And to Amalia's dismay, Bartolome stepped back saying nothing. Vito drew his knife across the neck of the poor baggage carrier, and his blood sprayed out, but instead of flying upwards, it flowed down and into the altar, into its grooves. The altar glowed, and the blood flowed towards the door, which also started to glow, and then it opened with a thunderous boom. And at the same time, the voice calling Amalia to find the golden door was now speaking to her more loudly than ever before. All right, my friends, that wraps up the first installment of the Lost Caverns of Ixalan story. We have multiple more installments coming out each day, so come on by for the next one. Big thank you to the channel's patrons and members for supporting the channel. If you enjoy what we're doing here, you can support us by joining the membership or the Patreon. Thanks for coming by. See you guys for the next video. And in the meantime, remember, my friends, lore is life.